Most of us who have gone through these awful work experiences think that we're crazy, right? But ultimately you have to trust what you're feeling. You have to trust your experience. There's a few things I want to go over today. Specifically, we're getting into how to kind of guard and protect yourself if you're dealing with a less than desirable workplace environment. So this is really key for people who are experiencing some type of toxic workforce environment, toxic management, maybe toxic colleagues. What I mean by toxic is working in and around a team or an environment that is inherently malicious. So either somebody is doing something to intentionally cause harm or downfall upon another person, or it could be a manipulative type of engagement. So somebody always trying to manipulate to get what they want, or to kind of get others to emote a certain type of emotion. There are different ways we could look at a toxic workplace. So let's get into that first, and then we'll cover how you can safeguard yourself in the workplace. But before we get started, who am I? My name is Ashley. This channel covers everything business culture, IO psychology, marketing, believe it or not, and some humanizing spiritual concepts. So I'm all about humanizing business here. And my path began through military service and other workplace environments that were less than desirable, but ultimately led me down this path to pursue a master's in IO psychology. So that is what my focus is on primarily. How an IO psychologist might help the workforce is by conducting studies or surveys, or really working with the team to identify ways to make a better workplace culture, or remove toxicity, or increase productivity. There's different things that they can look at. It's a very versatile career. So I just wanted to give that backstory before we jump into this. Now, you don't need a master's degree to be able to do a quick search online and find some different compelling articles by different organizations on toxic work environments. We can look at this result here. It says a toxic work environment is one where negative behaviors such as bullying, harassment, and disrespect are pervasive, leading to a lack of trust, high stress, and ultimately a negative impact on employee well-being and productivity. I could not say that better myself. So if you are in an environment, regardless, you might think you're crazy. Most of us who have gone through these awful work experiences think that we're crazy, right? But ultimately you have to trust what you're feeling. You have to trust your experience. And if you are feeling like you are dreading going to work because you're anxious about running into certain people or coming across certain situations, one, I would encourage you to do some deep diving if you haven't already, and try to address the root of those feelings with yourself, because all we have control of is ourselves. And that's a really fantastic place to start. And then also looking at and maybe addressing the workplace. Now, it's really difficult. I did a conversation on this a few years ago. I called it Death in the Workplace. And I did that because there's a large percentage. I need to go back and look at the numbers, so we'll do that here. But there's a large percentage of people when they filled out surveys that mentioned they had some kind of stress or depression related directly to their workplace. And it was some wild number. This was many years ago that I did this conversation on this topic. But a large percentage of people who feel this type of stress or toxicity or dread going into the workplace, they then come home and those same feelings are kind of leaching into the home, which is disrupting harmony in the home. And as much as we would love to say that we can cut it off when we enter the door frame of our home and leave that all behind, it's not always that easy for some people, especially for those who are in work environments where they're being reached after hours, or they have stressors about the next day constantly. I went through that myself, working with different clients, and some clients were completely awful to work with because there just was no off, right? Like I was constantly thinking about the campaigns the next day. There just was no off button. So it was really detrimental for me. A really great resource to look into when we're talking about depression or psychological studies is the APA, which is the American Psychological Association. I knew I was going to get that right. I just had to look briefly. And they did a study in 2023. It was a Work in America survey, talking about the level of employees in the workforce experiencing work-related stress. And so what they found was that 92% of workers said that it is somewhat important for them to work in an organization that values their well-being, so that's emotional and psychological, 92% of the workforce. That's a big number. That's almost all of us. 92% of employees prefer an organization that are going to value their well-being. The majority of workers report being somewhat satisfied with the support that they're getting from their business, which is great. We love that number. But the reality, here we go. Okay, there was a number in here that I was looking at regarding depression and sadness. Where did we go? I'm going to include this link also in the description, so you are welcome to go through this with me. But it was something crazy, like, thumbs up. It was something crazy like 70%. Let's double check here. You know what we're going to do? Because this is a long document. So we're going to look up stress. There we go. There we go. Found it. You see how easy that was? It just had to use the tools at hand. Okay, so improvement still needed. Workplace stress also remains at a concerning level, with 77% of workers reported experiencing work-related stress in the last month. This was just in 2023. We are not far past that. Further, 57% indicated experiencing negative impacts because of work-related stress associated with workplace burnout, also called occupational burnout. So if you've been on my channel at all, you've seen me talk about some of these topics here. That can include emotional exhaustion, not motivated to do their best, a desire to keep to themselves, a desire to quit, low productivity, irritability or anger, and feelings of being ineffective. So you can imagine when somebody is ruminating and feeling this all day long in their business, they might be able to leave that day and go blow off steam somewhere. But if they have to then come home and they have a family or they have partners or they have other obligations, some are working 2, 3, or 4 jobs just to keep their heads above the water right now. You can imagine that those feelings of just not feeling well leaking into other parts and other areas of their lives. This is why I advocate for sabbatical policies for companies, and I advocate for employees to know that they should have that right, or at least plan for those seasons in their life. So if you can't get a job where sabbatical policies are a thing, try to save up money or plan for a season like that where you can take the time off to have that. And a sabbatical is just an extended period of time. Personally, for me, at least 60 to 90 days off, no responsibility, no obligation to work, where you can just focus on self-development, go on retreats, travel, pick up a new hobby, do something productive with yourself that doesn't involve work, right? So now I've covered a little bit about what a toxic environment is, how it might feel according to this APA survey done in 2023, what employees are experiencing when they're not satisfied with the workplace. And now we're going to talk a little bit on what you can do to help safeguard yourself and mitigate these same symptoms of burnout and depression and sadness within the workplace, just an overall lack of enjoyment or fulfillment. If you're in a toxic environment or you feel threatened or you feel actively pursued or targeted in a certain way and you're not able to immediately terminate your job for different reasons. For me, I was in a contract and I was unable to leave. I was unable to really file or take things up with my superiors because we all were kind of intermixed with each other. So either way, it would have disrupted my workplace even more. So if you're in a situation like that, what I did as an employee at that time, and now what I encourage through my studies in IO psychology, is to keep a notebook of instances where you can document the date, the time, the witnesses, exact word for word, if you can, of what was being said or done that caused you to feel that way. I started doing that at the request of one of my supervisors at the time. She really advocated for me and taught me how to protect myself in that situation. And it absolutely worked. Once they saw I was carrying my little notebook around, it made the aggressors feel really uncomfortable, and therefore they were a little bit more mindful of how they treated me. And, I just didn't care at that point about their opinions. I cared more about protecting myself and making sure that I was accurately documenting things to give myself an added layer of protection, so that if I was emotional or if I was upset about something, or if I just couldn't quite remember because it was happening every single day, that I had real documentation of who was present, the time, the day, what was done, to make me feel like this was something I needed to document. And that was just a really foolproof way to have a lot of data and material to work with if I needed to pursue it further. So that's one step. Once you have that information, you then should be able to go to the equivalent of who your HR team is. If you feel uncomfortable going to your HR team because they're kind of all intermixed with each other and you feel like that might come back at you, you can always go to your HR, but then seek out a third-party representative of some sort to help represent you if you need to really advocate to get out of a situation, but you can't. Now, that advice is for those of you who are in a situation where you cannot leave, even if you wanted to. And this includes if you're the primary breadwinner or the sole provider of your home, or you bring in a large bulk of the income, or your income is just necessary and you can't afford to quit right away. Obviously, making opportunities or making attempts to try to get out of that situation by finding another position or role. We're in a very difficult place right now where there are hiring freezes and people are finding it difficult to get hired at the time of this video. So I empathize with your situation if this is you. I've personally been there myself, and this is the best way that I was able to safeguard myself and kind of take back my own power and feel empowered, because I knew I was gathering a data book of just instance after instance, and it started to make me feel like I was protected, or like I had enough to really use if I needed to. The next thing I would do if you're really feeling like you're entering a stage of burnout is to start making arrangements. If you can make it before, like, hear me out. If you're listening to this video and you're not at a stage of burnout, but you know that you would like a break at some point, I encourage you to establish your own sabbatical opportunity if your company does not offer it already. Like I said in previous videos, I have seen companies that offer sabbaticals, but typically you have to be an employee for 2 to 3 years or more before you qualify for those perks. So if you are not in a position to have this offered by your company, I would encourage you to plan your own sabbaticals and maybe even negotiate with your team before you get hired, or if you're negotiating a raise of some sort, if you can negotiate or kind of make a way for yourself to take at least 60 days off of work. They do this when people are injured or if they're on extended leaves, for example, pregnancy, and you see how well the team can pull together and really work together to cover those periods at those times. I truly feel that the same should be done for just general self-development. If I want to take those 60 days and do absolutely nothing with myself, so what? That's my time to do it with. If I want to take those 60 days and go travel the world, I should be able to do that. And I should not be worried about losing my job as I pursue whatever self-development looks like for me. Now, of course, the companies have to be protected. There would have to be some protections in place if you're off going and getting other jobs and leaving them, right? So there would have to be some policies in place, but this is why I advocate for sabbatical policies, just to make sure that everybody's protected, but also that you as an employee, as a professional, as a business person gets the break that you need to actually go and pursue self-development, which is ultimately going to make you a better person for society, a better person for your company, and you're going to be able to show up in a massively different way than if you never took time off except for the standard 1 week a year. Like, that's crazy. Now, if you are in a situation where you could probably exit immediately and it's a toxic work environment, for example, I would definitely look at how you can leverage your days off to go and pursue those other opportunities. And that's very important because you are offered time off for a reason. And that is to do with what you need to do with. So use those days off. Go do some interviews, especially if this is a very painful or toxic environment for you to work in, and start to make a plan to get away from that or pursue other opportunities. I also know people that will use that time to go back to school, for example. I know that's something that I did. And I know many others in classes that I've taken who were on a similar path in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, pivoting to go back to school because it was a great time off for them to just get back into the student mode and learning and curiosity again. And it's been really massively beneficial for me. And from other classmates that I've spoken to about these things, it's helped them as well. Keeping in mind that I am in an IO psychology degree. And so a lot of us were kind of in that path anyways, where we were seeking to kind of revolutionize the business industry. And one of the last things I want to say is that if you do find yourself in a very difficult situation, or you're not able to get along with your colleagues or your management or your leadership team, I just want to let you know that it is okay. It will be okay. It feels heinous at the time even to go through, but just being human beings in general, where we do have to communicate, if every individual is not doing their work and their personal time to just become a better person and work on themselves and their triggers and their shortcomings, it's going to be very difficult to show up in the workplace and kind of coexist with all of that. The way people communicate sometimes are not healthy, and that does translate to how they communicate at work. So you can see how easy it could be to get into situations that are not ideal. And I just want to let you know that it is okay. It will be okay. There are steps that you can take to make it better and to seek other opportunities. And if you're watching this, you probably already know that. The big message here is just how to safeguard yourself if you are in an environment that you can't leave, and how to plan and maybe aspire toward implementing sabbaticals for yourself. If you love this content, I encourage you to stick around, give me a follow, a subscribe, a share with somebody you know. It does help more than you know. And this is just the beginning. We have big, big plans here, or at least I do, for this channel. And so I really look forward to bringing this to life with all of you. Until next time.